So another content creator, Mr. McGroovy, had been talking about in multiple videos something called Old Comic Book Day. And it got me thinking about my own reading habits. Hey, this is James for Read More Comics. As I shared in the intro, Mr. McGroovy over on his channel, he's mentioned Old Comic Book Day, or OCBD. Sorry, I keep wanting to move some letters around multiple times. And so I hit him up on Instagram because he'd invited me to, in a comment on one of his videos, to chat about it. We had this long, rambling video chat over on StreamYard where he kind of walked through his process and how he developed this concept for him. And it got me thinking about my own reading habits, how I want to turn the comic book collection I've been curating, and not just to some sort of like museum of comic books, but actually the library of books that I value and I want to read. And so I developed a system. So step one of my system required me to revise my read box. This is my read box right here. And I'm gonna link some videos up here at the top where I kind of walk through the process I went through about a month, 2 months ago to revise my reading habits, to help me process my comic books as they came in. In a nutshell, I'd had 3 categories, kind of backlog books that I'm waiting on. These could be titles like Fire and Ice, where I'm waiting for the next book to come out. I want to binge through the whole series. We got Lucky Devils back here, but it can also be other books like Wonder Woman, where it's a facsimile book, and so it doesn't have to be prioritized. On deck books, these are where all my new comic book day books go. Absolute Batman, Green Arrow, Absolute Superman. And then the must read, this is the category I put the handful of books that I choose in either one of these 2 categories. And it's been working really well. When I first introduced this, I had this entire short box right here full, and it actually was overflow was going on top of some of my other short boxes around it. So I've been able to process through this pretty quickly because my choices have been kind of streamlined. Well, I need to change these, and I'm going to move them from these 3 categories to an additional one. I'm going to add Old Comic Book Day to it. I'm going to separate it out from New Comic Book Day because I want this one to be more organic, where this has to be intentional. I have more than 8,000 books. If I'm not intentional in choosing what books I'm reading, then I'm not going to get anywhere with anything. So let's go ahead and pause it right here. I'll revise it and you'll get a chance to see what it looks like. All right, so I pulled out the old tabs, I put in the new ones. It doesn't change much on the appearance of it. I went with white BCW comic book dividers because that's just what I happen to have on hand, and I'll just recycle these. These will end up in some other short box later. So we got New Comic Book Day, and this is the one where I expect throughout a week I'll be refilling at least once. Old Comic Book Day, my goal is I'm only going to touch this once a week, and we'll talk about that a little bit more with step 2. On deck, this is where all my New Comic Book Day books typically will live, unless it's a particular title I'm waiting for some of the series to finish up, or it's a facsimile book, or there's some other reason it ends up back here. Okay, so this is step 1. Let's talk about step 2. So for step 2, I needed to kind of divide it up into 2 parts, or at least I did divide it up into 2 parts. First, I needed to decide where I was going to start with Old Comic Book Day. I have, according to CLZ, like more than 1,000 different series. Now, some of those could be a one-shot. Because of how it organizes things, some things might be a trade paperback or whatever. I wanted to narrow down on a few runs that I've been working on that over the last couple of years, I feel like I've invested a lot of time, effort, money, and I want to actually see something, a payoff for that. And so I'm going to focus on 4 titles, and I'm choosing 4 to start with because I don't want to overload the system. I want to see some success in what I'm reading. Now, this is not some sort of reading goal like, oh, I need to read 4 books a week or something like that. I know how much I normally read, and easily I'm reading somewhere between 10 and 15 books a week. I want to integrate that into my reading habits. So I'm choosing 4, which is going to displace some of my new comic book day books, and that's okay. I'm choosing 4 books that I think I'm going to be able to get into because, again, I want to see some success. And then if it's working out, I already have some other titles on deck. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with Batman Volume 1, starting with Year 1. I've read the trade, but I'm actually going to read the individual issues. Actually, it's not that. I'm starting with issue 400, which is the beginning of kind of my Volume 1 collection. So I want to start with Volume 1 of Batman and see some success and go through and read some of the stories in that. The second title I'm going to be focusing on is Captain America, specifically Ed Brubaker's run. This is what inspired me to get into Captain America, and it's kind of reverse, actually. Chris Evans inspired me to get into Captain America because I've heard so many good things about Ed Brubaker's run. This is where Winter Soldier comes in, and all of that really made Captain America in the MCU be a role model as what a member of the Greatest Generation. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is Silver Surfer Volume 3. I have almost the entire run. I'm missing a couple issues, but those are on mail. I've ordered those, so I'm going to have the whole run. Well, I want to read the comic now. I find that Silver Surfer is this stoic character that I really connect with because I see myself kind of as a stoic. And then number 4, I've heard a lot about John Byrne. I like John Byrne in other books I've read. Well, I'm going to start with John Byrne's Fantastic Four run. That's a good place to get my feet wet in the Volume 1 I have. And then I can kind of pivot to something else or continue on through it. I really kind of honestly want to get to Jonathan Hickman's run, but I'm going to get my feet wet with John Byrne's run. So those are the 4 titles I've chosen. What I'm not going to show you because it's going to take, okay, it literally took me like 2 or 3 hours yesterday, is I moved comic book boxes around in my room. I have a pretty finite space right now, and I want to be able to easily access those 4 specific titles without doing a lot of work. Okay, so that's going to move on to step 3, how I'm going to keep track of this. So for step 3, I needed a system to keep track of what I'm reading each week. And again, I want to reiterate this. This is not establishing a reading goal. If I don't get to these books, I just roll them forward to the next week. The point of this is to help me schedule what I'm going to be pulling out of my short boxes each week. As you can see on this spreadsheet template, I have it mapped out until the end of the year. We have 26 more weeks left. And that way I don't get caught up in some sort of decision paralysis. At the beginning of the week, I just pull the books out. I put them in my read pile. I made this simple template. I'm going to be sharing a link to this in the description of this video. So that way, if this appeals to you, you can make a copy of it, make it work for you. I'm going to be putting the title of the books I'm going to be reading, and then I'm putting the issue numbers week to week that I'm pulling out. I'm only going to be starting with 4, and I'm adding some additional rows just to kind of help me keep track of my reading habits throughout the year. It's not necessarily, again, some sort of reading goal. It's just helping me log it. That's going to help me pivot to the second page, or the second tab. Let's make this a little bit bigger right there, where I can keep track of specific memorable moments from issue to issue. Now, I'm not going to be logging all of my books, but I've reached a point in my life where if I don't take a note, I forget things. And so if there's something memorable in one of the books I'm reading, I want to have a place where I can just jot it down so that way it helps me process what's going on. Here's my actual reading log right here. Okay, so I got my reading list, Batman Volume 1, and I'm starting with issue 400, but then I'm getting into year 1 right here, which is the Mazzucchelli run. I've read the trade. I'm really looking forward to going back to this, though, because it's been some time. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be reading Brubaker's run on Captain America. I'm not going to finish this. You can see all the way at the end. I'm not getting to the end of his run, but I get through a good part of it. I get through Winter Soldier and the beginning of the run, the story arc after that. I'm going to be reading John Byrne's run in Fantastic Four, which I've heard only good things. And then I'm going to start Silver Surfer Volume 3. And I'm kind of jumping around in that to focus on specific story arcs. I'm using some online sources. Really, I'm going to ChatGPT to help me process each one of these volumes. So that way I know what stands out and help me kind of make that decision beforehand. So there you have it. There's my system and the 3 steps that I have. I'm going to probably loop back around to this in a month or two just to reflect on how it's been working and the changes I had to, because undoubtedly there will be some revisions to the system, but I'm pretty excited about how this is going to turn my collection of comic books into a comic book reading library, which it hasn't been for some time. I want to thank Mr. McGroovy for spending time to share his process earlier this week. That was invaluable in me developing this. And thank you for listening to me ramble on about my process, my reflections this summer about comic book collecting and reading. If you do like this content, please do hit the like button, hit the bell in the corner so you get notifications when I post new content. Subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to hear what your system is to read your backlog of comic books. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget, life really is so much better when we read more comics.